Hello and welcome to Conversations. I'm Jim Blow, your host. Very pleased to have joining me today State Representative Yousef Rabhi from the 53rd District. Most of Ann Arbor, welcome back to Conversations.
Thanks for having me again. This is great.
And you've now officially been a state rep for your first term is concluding this December, so for 2 years. Has it been what you thought it was going to be?
It's been quite the adventure, and I've actually really enjoyed myself. It's been a real learning opportunity for me, meeting a lot of great new people from across the state and expanding my knowledge base about all these different issues and topics that we vote on. You really have to learn quickly when it comes to voting on bills.
And your background politically had been at the more local level, the county commission.
That's right.
And what, from that experience, have you been able to take to Lansing? And you found it either helpful to have had that background, or it's so much different that you almost had to put it aside?
No, actually, being a county commissioner was a huge help and really expanded my knowledge base for when I got there. And we deal with such a variety of things at the state level, but we had dealt with a lot of that variety already at the county level. And so I sort of came in with this knowledge base that really helped me to understand and delve into these issues in a way that I don't think I would have been able to if I hadn't had that experience at the
What
county.
were some of the issues that in Washtenaw County that as a county commissioner you had to address that you found as you say helpful having had that background in Lansing now and looking at it from both the local perspective, but also a statewide perspective?
So a big part of that is just understanding the impact of state decision making on local budgets or on local, one of the big issues is unfunded mandates too, where the state will make decisions and say, okay, local governments, you guys have to do this, but then not provide any resources for it, right? And so understanding that dynamic, I think, is really important. And then understanding, as we look at mental health issues, for example, and mental health funding, how that's actually going to impact the locals. I had a firsthand front seat, view of how that happened. So all of that really applied and has continued to be applicable to my work as a state representative.
Now, in the state legislature, one of the responsibilities that you and all members have is working at committees. What committees have you been on? And to what extent has, going back to the local experience, helped you in that specific committee work?
Well, so my committee assignment is House Appropriations. So I get to sit on the Appropriations Committee. My 3 subcommittees are Department of Environmental Quality, Higher Education, and Community Colleges. And of course, as a county commissioner, we had budgetary responsibilities. All 9 of us had to be knowledgeable, understanding how to read a budget, understanding how to balance a budget, and then understanding what changes in the budget would have in terms of ramifications on service provision. And so now, right at the state level, having that understanding of how a state level funding decision can impact a line item in the county budget really helped me to jump into that role in a way that I think really helped me to have that knowledge base going into it to be ready to go on day one.
You mentioned one of your subcommittees dealt with the environment.
Yeah.
And what in these 2 years has that subcommittee attempted to address, or have you found it to be successful, or are there things that you would like to see that committee and the legislature address more than they have related to environmental issues?
Overall, I would say that I've been disappointed at the lack of investment and care that has been put into addressing some of the environmental issues we've had in Michigan. I come to Lansing, in addition to being from local government, I also have an environmental science background. And so knowing some of these issues like the PFAS contamination, the Gelman plume, and other big issues that are facing our community and frankly communities across our state, the DEQ really hasn't taken the approach that it needs to solve these problems. Now, we've made some progress in those areas. We've allocated some money for the DEQ to start doing PFAS testing itself, for the DEQ to be able to ramp up efforts around PFAS a little bit more. But in some degrees, it's too little too late. The DEQ knew what was going on well before now and had plenty of time to adjust and just didn't.
What exactly is PFAS? And it seems like it's something that just over the last, 6 to 12 months has sort of become an issue.
Right.
But as you say, it's been there, but not in the public eye.
So PFAS is an interesting contaminant because PFAS was widely used in a lot of products that we use around the house. PFAS could be found in nonstick Teflon pans. It could be found in microwavable popcorn bags. in all kinds of different uses. Even on your shoes, that was a big use of it, was water protection, waterproofing shoes. It's also in firefighting foam. So it was pretty ubiquitous in terms of a chemical. And it was only recently, within the last 5 to 6 years, that research started to show how dangerous this was for human health and how carcinogenic it could be. And so there was a staffer at the Department of Environmental Quality that sort of raised the alarm about 5 years ago and said, hey, this is a problem, and we have contaminated sites in Michigan where people are potentially drinking groundwater of that contaminant, but the DEQ just didn't respond to it. And it wasn't until about a year ago in 2017 that really this became a public health issue that people around the state were aware of. And so, it should have been dealt with earlier. We could have done a lot more. And there's a lot more that needs to be done still. So
you have this having now entered potentially entered the groundwater, and some of the areas near airports, I guess, as you say, it was used in de-icing, was it, or
firefighting foam? Yeah.
Foam. Okay.
So a lot of Department of Defense Air Force bases in Michigan have contamination around those sites, especially in northern Michigan. The other areas where we're finding this are the Wolverine shoe manufacturing facilities because of that, waterproofing. And they actually injected a lot of the contaminant into the groundwater, and so big swaths of the groundwater in northern Michigan are contaminated now with this PFAS. And of course, we found it in the Huron River. Our groundwater here in Ann Arbor is not yet contaminated with any PFAS, but it's in the Huron River. And there are specific sites that have been identified. The main one that the DEQ identified is a chrome plating facility in Wixom. And unfortunately, again, this is an example of something that we've been trying to work on with the DEQ. When they found out about it, they let them continue to dump their PFAS-laden water into the Huron River. And we issued a letter. My office drafted it, and I had all of our Democratic delegation in Washtenaw County sign on to it, sent it to the DEQ, and said, this is unacceptable. Like, we have, our residents are drinking this water that this company is dumping its contaminated water into.
And as you say, it's not impacted the area of the Huron River that Ann Arbor gets its water from.
It actually has. Yeah, it actually, that PFAS has actually gotten into Barton Pond. Ann Arbor gets about 20% of its water from groundwater. That source is clean and does not have PFAS in it.
Out by the airport for the most part, the aquifers.
Yeah, and so then the other 80% comes from Barton Pond, and that's where we're finding a lot more PFAS. Now, the city of Ann Arbor has reacted to this problem and has installed an increased carbon filtration system. Carbon filtration is actually really effective at getting PFAS out of the water, and so our water should be okay to drink, but it's concerning that it's in the river, and there have been obviously warnings issued to not eat the fish. If you fish in the Huron River, don't eat the fish. Don't let your pets come into contact with the foam on the Huron River. And even so those are the big issues. But so we issued this letter, and we asked the DEQ to act and actually protect public health. And within 2 days, the company announced that they were going to install a filtration system to actually filter their water.
So there are things that businesses can do to either eliminate or reduce the contaminant from their factory into what is dumped or leaves the company. It's a matter of, for a long time, it wasn't done because no one was, you could say, aware of the potential hazard. And then now that it is clearly identified as a carcinogen, it's now a matter of having the power to require it to be done.
Right. Well, the awareness, I think, has been there for a while, and action has not followed up with that. And now that we know for sure, and now that the DEQ has identified the source, there needs to be concrete actions taken to shut those sources down so that we're protecting our water here in Ann Arbor. So, and that's still something that we're working with the DEQ on, because even though now the company is filtering their effluent that's coming out of their factory, apparently we've found now that the rainwater that hits the site, the parking lot and the roof, is carrying PFAS contamination into the storm drains and into the river. So that's an ongoing concern that we still need to resolve.
In speaking about Ann Arbor, we have known since the 80s with respect to what is referred to as the Gullman plume, and there had been efforts to get the DEQ or others in the state to appropriate funds to monitor or at least sort of do what can be done. Once it gets in the groundwater, what can be done?
For dioxane, actually, there is a treatment mechanism
Okay.
that you can do, just like with PFAS. These are treatable problems, and it just requires some resources to be able
And a commitment to do it.
and a commitment to do it, right? Of course. And so right now the problem is that the corporation, of course, is not, it's trying to resist any effort to
Make them pay for it.
make them pay for it, right? And so there's an ongoing court case where the state and the city and the county and all these different actors are trying to force the company to pay for at least a portion of it to begin that cleanup process in earnest. So.
Okay, we're going to take a short break, come back, and one of the big issues at this time of the year is what's referred to as the lame duck session, and come back and try and get a better understanding of what it is, what's attempting to be done, and realistically what might occur. Ask our viewers to stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment.
Ann Arbor is home to more than 150 parks. That's 150 reasons to get out and get active around town. In addition to more traditional parks, Ann Arbor has some unique amenities, like the Universal Access Playground, Ann Arbor Skate Park, and 2 disc golf courses, all free of charge. With all of this and more, Ann Arbor is sure to have something fun for everyone. Come out and see for yourself. Visit a2gov.org/parks or call 734-794-6230 for more information.
Here at CTN, we offer a variety of different training workshops for our Ann Arbor residents as well as local nonprofits. Learn about different editing programs, Final Cut Pro, iMovie, and even Motion is available. Or how about studio production? You can even sign up for our Hotline Studio Workshop, where you can direct and produce your own television show. Go online to a2gov.org/CTN and head over to our Workshops tab. There, you can find a link to our convenient online sign-up sheet, as well as an in-depth description of what each workshop has to offer. CTN. Connect, create, communicate.
Hello and welcome back to Conversations. I'm speaking today with State Representative Yousef Rabhi, 53rd District, and talked about some of the issues that you've been working on over the last 2 years, but we are now in a time period known as the lame duck session. The election in November is taking place. The new elected governor, state legislature will take office 1st of January, essentially. But this is a little bit different in that you have a shift or a change in the political power that's about to take place. First of all, what from your perspective as a member of the legislature, has this time period between the election and end of the year been like, and what might we still see coming out of this?
So we are about halfway through what's called this lame duck period, as you were saying. And it started just after Thanksgiving and will go probably, as it's scheduled right now, it'll go until the 20th of December. So we're about halfway through. And what it's been like so far, because of the transition in power in government, you know, for the last 8 years, we've had full Republican control of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government. And now with a change in the executive branch, what we're seeing is that the Republican-controlled legislature, which is maintaining its majority in January, is trying to roll back some of the powers of the executive branch. And we've seen a number of bills that do that. So this
just to clarify, the executive branch, what we're talking about is we will have a new governor,
right,
shifting from a Republican to a Democrat. We will have a new attorney general, shifting from Republican to Democrat,
right,
and Secretary of State, shifting from Republican to Democrat. And those last two, where at the federal level are appointed, the Secretary of State and the Attorney General were elected by the people. And they have very specific, you say, duties, responsibilities, and they have to sort of please the people. It's not like getting appointed by the
work
president.
for all of us. Yeah,
right.
They don't work, so they're not appointed. And so what we're seeing is some legislation that's specifically aimed at those offices. For example, there was a bill that was voted out of the House that empowers the state legislature, the state Senate and the state House to intervene in any litigation. So any court case in the state, the legislature could step in and intervene in those proceedings, whereas that was generally something that was reserved for the Attorney General before,
right.
That is now being transferred to the legislature essentially.
But intervene means what?
Can hire attorneys, can sit in the courtroom.
Oh, okay.
So there was recently, for example, a court case involving the prevailing wage law that was recently repealed. And the Republican-led legislature tried to intervene in that case, and the judge said that that was inappropriate for the legislature to do that, and did not grant them standing.
Right.
And so this would basically roll that back and say, okay, nope, they're going to be
You'll
able
have
to
standing.
intercede.
You'll have the right to intervene.
Correct.
Would it take away the right also for the Attorney General?
Well, one of the things that the Attorney General has at their disposal is the ability to not intervene in a court case if they don't want to. And so this would basically take that power away. The state will be involved likely in many court cases, regardless of whether that's something that the Attorney General wants to get involved in or not. And so it takes some power away from the Attorney General and grants some more power to the legislative branch. And similarly with the Secretary of State, there's a bill out of the Senate that would remove the oversight ability over election finance, campaign finance.
Yeah.
Right now that's a Secretary of State function, and that would be removed from the Secretary of State and given to an appointed committee.
Right. Now, in both those cases, you mentioned that they've come out of the Senate, the full Senate or the Senate committees?
So the Secretary of State bill came out of the Senate, full Senate,
Right.
and the Attorney General bill came out of the full House.
Okay.
So they're going to the other chamber.
All right, that's the point, is they now must be approved by the other part of the legislature.
That's right. And for the governor's office, and this actually impacts all of government, but there's a bill before us now that has not been voted out of the House or the Senate.
It's just being discussed.
It's just being discussed, but it probably will be voted on next week, which would bar the state from passing any laws that are stricter than the federal government.
Okay.
So it would cap any law that we pass at the federal standard and not allow us to go beyond that. So say the federal government said that it was okay for us to have 70 parts per trillion of PFAS in our water, and we wanted to say, no, it really should be 5, we could not do that. We would
Similar
not
to
be allowed to do that.
California's EPA, California has stricter controlled over automobiles and that as far as emissions.
Honestly, I would say that many states have stricter standards than the federal level. The federal level is supposed to be in different areas, right? Exactly. The federal level is generally supposed to be a baseline, and then states can pass more, higher standards for different things, including education, mental health standards, environmental standards,
and it will vary state by
standards.
state because each state has different issues or concerns that they want to address.
Right.
Okay. But that's right now just being, quote, discussed.
It's being discussed,
right?
And there will be likely, it was on the agenda last Thursday and will likely be back on the agenda this coming tomorrow.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
And so, how is there still, or not still, but when a proposed law bill gets passed, let's say by the House, it will then go to the Senate.
Yep.
Is there a time
There's a-
frame that the Senate must, you could say, wait or not be able to pass too quickly?
There is a 5-day layover that
Okay.
bills are supposed to have.
Right.
That's not 5 business days. I think it's just 5 days total.
Okay.
But that rule has been suspended, I believe, in the
Okay.
past. And so it's not impossible for the legislature to move a little bit more quickly. But the 5-day layover is generally respected between the chambers.
Right.
So.
And the reason I ask that is, as you say, if the goal or the plan is to conclude business by the 20th of the
Right.
month,
Yeah.
we are now on the 10th. So, you know, the House and the Senate, if you're going to honor those 5 days, would need this week to pass
Yes. They would.
on to the
right.
other House
That's right.
and the legislature, legislation. And then the governor, once it's been passed by both,
Yeah.
the governor then has 2 weeks approximately
Yeah.
to make some decisions.
2 weeks to make some decisions, and once the end of the year happens,
It's over.
any bills that are remaining basically are dead. They
Yeah.
clear out. Yeah.
Right. And also, with respect to sort of the timing, the legislation has to be approved by the House and the Senate, and you could say exact same wording.
Right.
You,
If there's
so
any changes, it would have
any
to come
amendments,
back.
it would have to come back.
Yeah.
That doesn't take a 5-day
No.
layover. That could be immediate, so to speak.
I think there's supposed to be a 1-day layover,
Okay,
but
but-
they never
Yeah.
honor that. They always speed it through. So.
From your understanding and your discussion with members, both within your caucus and with Republicans, of those issues that have been discussed in this lame duck, which ones do you think will actually get sent on to the governor and potentially the governor will go ahead and sign?
So the main two, I think that well, there's a bunch
Yeah.
that's going on, right? That's the other thing with this lame duck period is there is a constant rapid fire of bills
Well, that goes
coming
into
at
the
us.
term limits.
Yeah.
The legislation that you've always wanted to see passed,
Right.
your last chance to.
And there's all kinds of deals getting cut with term-limited legislatures so that they'll vote for this bill if they get this bill and that bill and that bill. All kinds of deals. But the two big ones that we already passed out of the Senate and the House were the two bills to roll back the minimum wage ballot initiative.
That
and
has
the
gone
paid
on to the
sick
governor
time.
now.
And that has gone on to the governor now, and I don't believe he's acted on
Right.
it as of now. But it basically guts the citizen-initiated legislation around minimum wage and the citizen-initiated legislation around paid sick time, which would have increased wages in Michigan and granted sick time to people that are working in Michigan. So those have already happened. Those were two of the big ones. Some of the big ones coming up as well. There's bills to roll back wetlands protections in the state of Michigan. There's a bill to create a tunnel for Line 5.
Right.
So that's another big one. There's also bills to roll back union rights. So release time is a big thing for especially public sector unions to be able to do union work. And so they're passing a law to basically eliminate the ability to do release time. There's a bunch of school bills that will really change the way that schools are done in Michigan. So there's all kinds of stuff that's really coming
Being
at us.
discussed, and to what degree, well, as you say, the deals will have been made to get one or the other. And then, the governor is, yesterday on television, was very, not coy, but wouldn't step forward and say which ones he might or might not, approve.
I'm concerned because there's a number of bills that the governor, that were passed by the House and the Senate that went to the governor and the governor vetoed.
You're right.
That are being re-voted on and resent to him. And I think that's part of a strategy to put him, to basically use that as a negotiating tool, so that if the governor wants something, he'll have to sign into law the laws that he's already vetoed. So the ballast water bill, there was a bill to exempt private airplane parts from taxation, so it would help people that have private airplanes. The governor vetoed that as well. So there's a bunch of stuff that's in that category that's happening. But the big,
are they newly introduced, so to speak? Because does the legislature have? Can they override a veto?
they can override a veto, but
this isn't that. This is sort of a new new law that really says the same thing.
They changed a couple words and introduced it. So that's basically how that process works, unfortunately. But then the other part of it too is the supplemental appropriations bill is being held basically in the back pocket, and that's where a lot of those negotiations are happening. So
New year coming up, starting your second term, you will have a Democratic governor now. You will still be part of the Democratic caucus, which will still be a minority in the House.
But less of a minority.
Right, less of. How will things be different with a split, you could say, political power between the executive branch and the legislative branch? How do you see it being different for you next term?
I think things will be very different for me. I mean, right now, the Democratic caucus has very little negotiating power, and only when the legislature needs to amend a citizen-initiated legislation with 3/4 vote threshold will they really come to us and ask for help. For many other things, they don't ask the Democratic caucus for much, and we're not really at the table for negotiation. That will change when we have a Democratic governor and a Democratic attorney general, a Democratic secretary of state, where we will have, basically veto power, and we'll be working with the governor's office about that. So the bills that come out of the House and Senate, there will have to be negotiation, and the leadership, incoming House leadership at least, has expressed interest in working with us. And I've had House members come to me and want to have those conversations, and they're asking me, do you think Governor Whitmer would support these things, and so forth. And so I'm looking forward to having those discussions. I'm actually a very bipartisan person. I've worked a lot across the aisle with the Republicans. I've introduced packages of bills with Republicans. I've given Republicans bills to introduce, and they've moved forward. And so I'm looking forward to working in that way. And the Democratic caucus in both the House and the Senate is gaining new strength, right? Whereas now we have a 9-vote. We're 8 votes behind. We're nine votes from a majority,
right.
but 8 votes from basically killing a bill. Now we've closed that gap to 3 votes to killing a bill and 4 votes for a majority. So. And the same in the Senate.
With the shift here in the last minute, are there issues that you look forward to being able to work directly, that you have a passion for, that you see some hope for now?
One of the big issues in that category is criminal justice reform. There's been a lot of talk about raising the age. There's been a lot of talk about expungement around the new Prop 1 marijuana law that's passed, and people that have been sent to jail for things that would have been legal under Prop 1. So there's been a lot of conversations about that. Republicans and Democrats alike care about that issue for slightly different reasons, but still can come together on that. So that's one of those areas I think that we can really work on, and I'm hopeful. And I've already had some meetings actually with Republicans on that.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for updating us today, and look forward to having you back to sort of give an idea of how in reality things will have changed over the next year. And appreciate your time and effort on behalf of all the citizens.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. It's always a pleasure.
I want to thank our viewers for joining us today, and look forward to your continued support here on Conversations. Thank you.